see everyone out here this morning on a rainy day, and we appreciate your support for our advocacy program. There are too many notable folks in the room to mention, but I want to especially welcome folks from the county that are here. I've seen some freeholder director, someone from the Casino Control Commission. Certainly we have many mayors, Atlantic County Improvement Authority, and of course many of you are members of either members of the chamber or the chamber board. So again, thank you very much. Without further ado, you should have at your table or got on the registration table when you came in today's agenda. And I'm going to start off with introducing our first speaker. The first speaker is Sharon Schulman. She is CEO of External Affairs and Institutional Research for Stockton University. No longer Richard Stockton College of New Jersey. We got to fix that sign on the parkway.
I wish I had the pull.
Well, we got the sign. We can get it. Among those responsibilities, it's important to note Sharon's engagement and involvement and actually being the one that started the William J. Hughes Policy Center at the university, which I think we would all agree is a stellar institutional research and public policy organization. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up Sharon Schulman.
Good morning and thank you. I'm so glad to see you all today, and I just want to set a tone for today. This morning is a day to look forward to all that can be and how we're all going to get there. Let's focus on opportunities, where we're going, and the paths needed to get us there. It's okay to acknowledge that there are bumps in the road that we need to go over and around. We just can't let them be barriers to entry. So let me start off and tell you a little bit about Stockton. And as I'm even starting off about Stockton, there's somebody in the room that will later be a new Board of Trustees member here at Stockton, Meg Worthington. So Meg, thank you. We have a board meeting today where she'll get sworn in. Let me tell you a little bit about Stockton and peg that to what we do for economic development, and then you can envision what an additional residential campus can do for us. So let's talk about the fact that we have almost 9,000 students. Over 2,800 of them come from Atlantic County. We have nearly 1,400 Atlantic County residents who are employed with gross wages at about $58 million, greater than $58 million. Nearly 1/4 of our 48,000 alumni live here. Why should you care about that? Pretty simply because that's spending power. And we at Stockton need to buy to support their functions as students, faculty, and staff. And they, in turn, spend and invest and pay taxes. So Stockton can very well be and does drive a lot of the economy in the area. So now we're going to expand in Atlantic City with a residential campus, and this is going to exponentially expand that buying and spending power. Sure, it'll take a couple of years, but if we break ground later this spring, that spending is going to start right about then. And it will create entrepreneurial and employment opportunities along the way and around Atlantic City. We're not going to save Atlantic City. We are going to be a part of the Renaissance and help build an educated workforce and stimulate the economy. For the next couple of hours, we're going to hear what several of our municipalities are doing and any bumps in the road they may be encountering. But right now, we're going to begin with an Atlantic County Economic Development Alliance update and its progress from Howard Kyle, who's Chief of Staff to the Atlantic County Executive Dennis Levinson. Now, I'm supposed to stand up here and read his bio and tell him all these great things, give you 30 seconds, and then you can come up and talk about this. But almost everybody in this room knows Howard Kyle, you know his background. Let me just say what matters about Howard Kyle. It's far more important what he stands for. Passion and commitment and energy to this area to see it blossom economically, educationally, and more. Now it's your turn.
All right, it's my pleasure to be here. And before I start, most of you do know me, and we've discussed this issue in various forums, so I'm going to get to the point before. Before I came up, my good friend Max Fletcher gave me some advice. He says I tend to talk too quickly, which I do. And he said every time I get to an important point, to pause for 3 seconds. But that would add an hour to this presentation, so I'm going to cut through that. Atlantic County Economic Development Alliance. You know, it's a private sector economic development corporation. I'm going to start my speech today with with an ending. I'm going to begin with an ending. Recognize the line so we beat on, boast against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past of the great Gatsby, considered the most famous closing line in American literature. It's the last sentence. I chose that today because it sort of epitomizes the way some people approach economic development and the way we're changing from that format, right? We tend to think, or there's a tendency to think that if we go back and do something we did in the past, that somehow it's going to magically transform the area. For example, build a bigger Ferris wheel in the boardwalk, bring back Miss America, put an art park. All these things are somehow going to come together, and Atlantic County is going to thrive. It's not going to work that way. What we need to do, and what we are doing, is we're doing change in how we do economic development. Change in how we see it and how we manage it. Right? Old ways of doing things, as was pointed out by our consultant. Traditionally, the area has had top-down economic development. Not only Atlantic County, but the state has been that way. Throughout the state. The state dominates economic development policies. Right? We're trying now to get local leadership bottom-up economic development. No guiding economic development strategies. Nothing was ever in a document that said this is how we want to transform the region or how we want to shape the region. Now we have a comprehensive economic development strategy done. Right? No single point of entry. If a business wanted to do something here in Atlantic County, there was no one place to go. They'd go maybe to CRDA, SJTA, to local municipality, or whatever. There was no single point of entry. Now, through the Economic Development Corporation, there will be. There was no active business retention, attraction, and marketing program in place. We're going to be putting one into place. Right? Over focus on one industry sector and one area. Now we're going to have an emphasis on economic diversity and regional economic development. Right? Different approach, a different overall guiding philosophy. Old approach was fix Atlantic City and we'll fix Atlantic County. The new approach is fix Atlantic County, all municipalities working together, and then you wind up, we'll be fixing Atlantic City also. State government knows best, we know best. People in this room, people in business here, the Chamber of Commerce, we know best, right? And we need to work in partnership with the state. The old idea, let the state fix it. They're going to take care of it. They're going to run the convention center, they're going to run the airport, they're going to run the expressway, they're going to run economic development through the CRDA. No, we will fix it in cooperation with state government. The old way, passive. We just sat back. The new way is active. We're going to be involved. Right? Why is it critical to have regional economic development? If you look at the magnitude of the problems that we're facing, we have to use all our economic development resources and all our assets. Stockton, Atlantic Cape Community College, the FAA, the airport, even the agricultural community in the West, wildlife areas, all these things that also spur tourism. Right? The consultant, Angelo, when he came down in his final report, and I'm sure all of you have read it, and if you haven't, you should, made this observation. The extent of the dominance of gaming tourism in Atlantic County to the detriment of all other industry clusters is uncommon and should be regarded as a serious long-term threat to the economic prosperity, future economic prosperity. I'm going to follow Max's advice. I'm going to stop for 3 seconds. 2, 3. All right. That's important. That's important to recognize that. You can't have just reliance on one industry. As recently as last Sunday, I think the Philadelphia Inquirer, Dr. Oliver Cook, who writes the South Jersey Economic Review for Stockton, he's quoted as saying, for the regional economy to improve, a new industry would have to take hold. Leveraging the beach isn't necessarily a good bet. Let's drill down on this a little bit. Atlantic City is important, right? Atlantic City is important to Atlantic County. Tourism is important to Atlantic County. But tourism can't be the be-all and end-all. Let's look at this in context. When I was up in Trenton a few weeks ago, part of the testimony about a North Jersey casino, I was speaking to a couple state senators, and they were arguing for it. They were saying to me, you don't understand. When we get this North Jersey casino, we will be sending $200 million a year down to Atlantic City, right? And Atlantic City will then be a world-class destination. It'll be like Las Vegas and New Orleans. Well, let's look at that. Las Vegas is 135 square miles. It's 613,000 people. New Orleans, 169 square miles. 384,000 population. Nashville, Tennessee, exploding tourist destination. 475 square miles, 644,000 population. You can see the rest of the numbers. I won't go through them all. You come down to Atlantic City. 10.75 square miles, 39,415 people. Nowhere near the size and the area of those other communities, right? 36% people below the poverty rate. But the important point to note, it's 22% of the rateable base of Atlantic County. So everything is invested on a barrier island right now. Atlantic City, take out the blue, light green, the yellow, and the dark green, you come down to what's available to build on in Atlantic City. You come down to 3.5 square miles of developable area in Atlantic City. $200 million a year coming into Atlantic City. What can you do, Atlantic City alone, what can you do on 3.5 miles of land that's going to have an impact in a 550 square mile county? There's not much you're going to do. You've got to break out of that self-imposed box, right? This is the developable area throughout Atlantic County. Much more opportunity to do things in a broader sense. Right. Now, we are facing challenges in Atlantic County. There's no doubt about it. You know them as well as I do. Record levels of home foreclosure, record levels of unemployment, people leaving the area, a sense of pessimism opposed to my optimism, and the optimism I know that all of you have, right? So, the point I keep stressing, we are not the only area to ever have these type of challenges. People in numerous other cities, I just listed a few, have had them. Pittsburgh is a great example. Pittsburgh in the 1970s, early 1980s was going nowhere. It was losing population. Every problem we had, they had. Their major industry was declining and so forth. Pittsburgh today is thriving. It's a center for education, medicine, and technology. If people in Pittsburgh tended to think the way the state thinks here, they would be saying, nothing would happen in Pittsburgh, and they would be saying, we've got to make Pittsburgh the steel-producing capital of the world, right? Again. No, we got to move into different areas with different opportunities. Atlantic Magazine, just this month, was sent to me by Rick Dobie. He brought this to my attention. Great article about cities throughout the country that are making change, that are overcoming some sort of economic adversity. 3-minute video. I'm going to be quiet down and run through a 3-minute video, which hopefully, if the technology works, will start when I say.
435, Sierra is about 3 miles out on the right base. We're actually coming up to the Jackview intersection.
5 Sierra Romeo, building around tower, non-sight, runway 36, clear to land.
Clear to land 36, 435, Sierra.
From the national media, small towns, medium-sized towns don't get so much of a chance because the big press shows up when there's a tornado or a shooting or something bizarre like biggest butter sculpture.
Cute is not what we're looking for. It actually is, how does a town that loses one kind of industry get new industries? How does Mississippi, with its history, how does it move forward? And so it's a taking seriously places that don't usually get registered seriously. So we're standing right now right in front of the Lowndes County Courthouse, and behind us is 5th Street, which is one of the axes of downtown in Columbus, Mississippi, the other being where it crosses Main Street. We've been looking for places that have some real problems and also are finding some way to deal with them.
We've seen more than 50 towns in our travels, but we keep coming back to Columbus. After a long downward economic spiral, this area has begun to transform itself.
Brenda Lathan has lived here for over 40 years.
In the early 2000s, we started to see a lot of our manufacturing jobs go overseas. People were very depressed because we lost so many jobs around that time, not just us, but the surrounding counties. This facility at the time it closed was called American Trouser. In 1991, there were 414 employees, and when they closed, they had 30 employees.
Manufacturing in the area had all but disappeared until recently a new wave of businesses decided to relocate here. Now Brenda Lathan helps lead the Golden Triangle Development Link, the organization at the heart of Columbus's recovery. She works side by side with Joe Max Higgins, CEO of the link.
Here's the history behind this. The former mayor of West Point, Kenny Deal, he was mayor for 32 years, believed in regionalism before anybody else believed in regionalism. And he was the catalyst for getting some of the things done in this area. And within the last 4 or 5 years, we've started putting the Golden Triangle together, so now we work for the entire Golden Triangle.
The Golden Triangle represents the economic partnership among Lowndes County, Clay County, and Oktibbeha County, whose county seats are Columbus, West Point, and Starkville. Together, they've been able to secure state and federal funding and attract new businesses.
Before the link was formed, I think 1 or 2 legitimate prospects a year would come in and look. Once we started doing the link, it went on steroids. That wasn't uncommon for us to have 2, 3, sometimes 4 prospects in a week. In a period of about 12 years, we've just shy of $5 billion of investment. That just doesn't typically happen in places this small and this rural in the South.
Steel Dynamics and PACCAR were some of the first to arrive in the late 2000s. Why is this plant here in this part of the country?
The local development agency here, Link, they worked with us closely to get all the permits that were necessary.
And they made a difference in the predecessor companies to your current one deciding to locate here?
This is the place where they found that you can just go to one group for dealing with county, state, and even part of the federal organizations that you deal with when you construct a major plant like this.
That is just one of several cities that's highlighted in that article. So the emphasis I'm making is that we are not alone in having these challenges. We are just as capable, maybe even more capable than Columbus, Mississippi, of organizing, grouping together, and advancing in new, more promising directions. It's not that we're thinking of doing it, we are doing it, right? It's underway. We are ahead of the game right now. All right, we've already established an economic development corporation similar to the Link. It's established as a 501c3, as an unorganized corporation. We have a $500,000 5-year funding commitment, which we thank the ACEDA for. We also have space that we're negotiating and finalized with the Hamilton Law, which is being provided courtesy of the Hamilton Law, finalizing our bylaws, and we very shortly begin a search for an executive director. Our mission statement: to drive economic growth in Atlantic County through strategic planning and public-private partnerships that attract, retain, and support a diversity of businesses, industries, and creates quality jobs and lowers property taxes. Right? Mission focus: job creation, #1 priority. Business and industry retention, top priority. Regional economic development. Private sector leadership, very important. It's got to come from the private sector. It can't come only from the public sector. It's got to be politically independent. It can't be beholden to a politician. It needs to be financially independent, and it needs to be open, transparent, and inclusive, which means that we have to know how it's making its decisions, and we have to feel we have a say in how it's making its decisions. Right? Why is economic development alliance necessary? As I mentioned before, no organization has a primary mission comprehensive, coordinated regional economic development. It's not done right now. The existing efforts are parochial and uncoordinated, and they're not tied into any regional goals. Atlantic County area is at a strong disadvantage because we're competing with areas that have an entity like this. Right? And when we create this and we get it up and running, we're sending a clear message to business that we are serious about economic development. What do we do? I get this question a lot. What will you do that existing agencies aren't already doing, right? Well, as I mentioned, no one's doing business retention and marketing. Municipal efforts, they are doing it. A lot of municipalities have very aggressive programs. Summers Point is a perfect example of that. But the problem is it's not tied into a broader region. If someone comes into Summers Point possibly looking at something and it doesn't fit at Summers Point, generally they may just leave the area. They're not referred or tied into another area where they might fit in. All right? We need to coordinate and cooperate in development efforts. The Economic Development Alliance will not do bricks and mortar projects. In other words, it involves the construction of something like ACEDA does or CRDA does. They will remain with that agency. It won't come to the authority, the alliance. Final budget will be determined by the board. Investor fees and business contributions. There will be some additional public funding, as I mentioned. We already have that in place. And it's intended to be fully self-sufficient within 5 years. Our will be staffed. Final full staffing needs will be determined by the board. But all the hiring, this is something that's got to insist on, and you have got to make sure it happens this way too. All the hiring has got to be done in an open manner, seeking the best qualified people, right? We can't have, already people are calling up trying to say, I want to be the executive director of this. We've got to ensure that the people who run this operation are capable, qualified, and free to make independent decisions. We are going to begin a nationwide search for a qualified executive director. I want to stress something. When we say we're hiring an executive director through a nationwide search, we are not looking for some genius who's going to come in, have all the answers, and solve all our problems so we can sit back and relax. We are looking for an experienced economic development professional who has the ideas and the background to guide us into achieving the goals and objectives that we set out. All right? When will the ACEDA be in operation? Well, we already are, as I mentioned. We already have the plan. The plan was done by Angelos Economics. It was presented at a chamber event back in last September. We have identified our targeted industries. We know 4 of them. The top one, the one that is agreed offers the most immediate opportunities and the most promise is the aviation sector. And that's another subject for another day, but major advances are going to be made in that area. As you saw yesterday, the financing for that is being locked in, so we're ready to go in that. We already have squad funding, we're locking the office space, the earn board is in place, et cetera, et cetera. You thoughts about that? For the sake of time, that pretty much brings us to where we are. Our interim board, our chairman is Leo Schofer, Adobe, our treasurer, Joe Amy, cybersecurity specialist is our secretary, the other members are listed. You are capably represented on this agency by Rich Sinnemer from the Chamber Board. The Chamber has been extremely supportive and cooperative in this effort, and they are vital to success in this effort. And I thank Joe and I thank the Chamber for that. We could not have gotten as far as we have without Chamber support. And we look forward to continue working with the Chamber in the future.